Talk radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, welcome. How you doing? It's Fade to Black. Yeah, continuing another amazing week on the show. Today's Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Of course, you already know that. Monday, we had Daryl Sims on the show. Last night, Lon Strickler was back with us. Tonight, first-time guest Michael H. Brown, is with us. He's an author and researcher. I've titled the show Our Paranormal World because that's what he has been researching and writing about for many, many decades. We're going to get into all of that. Tomorrow night is our once-a-month AMA, AJA, Ask Me Anything. And besides tonight's show, right, those AJAs, those AMAs are some of the funnest things that I do. And hanging out with all of you and just answering your questions. I've been at this for a long time. And I realize now, not so much when I first started in radio, which is, this is going on 15 years now. But because at one point I was just a researcher and somebody that attended conferences and read all the books and did all of the things that you do. Now, after everything that I have compiled, I get it. I get it why people want to ask questions and get my opinions in. And maybe find out, weird stuff about me too as well. And I'll answer all of those questions. But I'm in that position today. And which is why, and my goal on this show, and with all of my producers and the writers and everybody that's involved with the show, is for me to collect knowledge from those that I follow and that I have learned from. And that's an amazing part of this journey that I'm on. And the other part of that, and we're going to do all of that tonight on the show with Michael, is because of the amount of shows that I have done, the traveling that I have done, the communication that I have done with the most prolific and amazing people. Now I ask questions a little bit differently. They come from a different place because I have so much now inside of my head. And tonight I'm going to try to get all of that out of Michael. And I want to remind everybody I've got 3 major events coming up in the second half of 2024. I'm going to Alaska in a couple of weeks. The Contact at Sea cruise, the links for that are below. That is September 6th. Through the 13th. Today's the 14th. This is coming up in 3 weeks. Alaska. The links are below. Egypt is coming up. Going back to Egypt again this year with Billy and Elizabeth Carson. And that is October 3rd through the 14th. And my birthday is October 10th. And each year we celebrate my birthday in Egypt. Come and hang out with us and celebrate my birthday. Typically, it's been in Luxor. The last couple of years. I'll look at the tour schedule and see where we are in Egypt this year, but we'll probably do it again on October 10th in Luxor. And then coming up after that is Peru and Bolivia. That is November 15th through the 27th. Again, sold out, but you can get on the waiting list. And if there's any cancellations, the links for all 3 tours are below. Come see the world with me. Come and do it, and then get some of those questions answered for yourself. All right, tonight, Michael Brown is with us, and we are going to be talking about, I've listed it this way, the paranormal, the miraculous, the haunted, aliens, cryptids. Michael calls it the greatest oddities, both supernatural and natural. We're going to be doing all of that. He's a journalist. He's an author of 29 books. And this is the thing. His links for his books are below, his website below. And his work has been featured in the New York Times Magazine, the Atlantic Monthly, Reader's Digest, Discover, Science Digest, and New York. He's also appeared on the Today Show, Nightline, the Phil Donahue Show, the Joan Rivers Show, and Sally Jessy Raphael. Again, his link is below, spiritdaily.com. And I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Michael H. Brown. And he's right there. Good evening, young man.
Hey, Jimmy. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. And now, you know what I do? First off, let me get the first time guest disclaimer out of the way. Let's do that so we can proceed, which is Michael, it's just you and I sitting on my couch, having a conversation as friends. Where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, it ends. But we're going to end as friends. Now, you have to accept so we can continue.
All right, you got a deal. Okay,
that was easy. Man. I didn't think you'd tap out that quick. Okay, so, but what I'd like to, whenever somebody uses their middle initial, I get a little cavalier and try to crack a joke and go, you're doing it to separate yourself from all the other Michael Brown out there, right?
Well, there's a few of those. Yeah.
There's quite a bit. So in your case, you've inputted your name as Michael Brown, but you run with Michael H. Brown. And there are a lot of Michael Browns out there. And I've known like 3 in my life, right?
Sure.
Pretty common.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm in safe territory. There's not that many Jimmy Churches running around. There are a couple, though. Now, I know you were just listening to me on the intro, and I am impressed with myself for one thing. All right. For some reason, at a very young age, I'm 60, but at a very young age, when I was like 8 years old, 7 years old, I went on this path of investigation because of my mom in the late 60s, early 70s. So I brag about my 50 years of research into this subject. But with somebody like yourself, you've got me beat. You've got me beat, young man.
Not by much. I've been looking into like UFOs and paranormal since the mid 60s, or maybe a little bit before reading Frank Edwards' book, Stranger Than Science and so forth. But I don't know. You're right up there.
Yeah. Can we talk about Frank Edwards for a second?
Yeah.
Frank Edwards, he inspired me a lot. And there was another cat back then, Long John Nebel. Do you remember Long John Nebel out of New York?
I did it. It was the first radio show I ever did was Long John Nebel.
Okay. Now,
in 1976, he was dying of cancer.
Right. That was right before he died. Yeah.
And it was in New York City. His wife, Candy Jones, was also on the set. Yeah.
Rumored to be a CIA agent, by the way.
Well, at least somebody who had been hypnotized, right, rather deeply.
Yes. A lot of people don't know that, they know about Long John, but and there's an internet archive of radio broadcast, and there is it's like one of those nonprofit.org .gov things for radio. Anyway, you can go and listen to all of Long John Nebel's broadcasts. And he was, as you know, he was on the air from the 50s all the way through the mid 70s. And he broadcast for 6 hours live.
Oh, yeah. I know. I was there.
Yeah.
And he was sitting in a wheelchair when I met him. And she had to carry on much of the show. He had cancer. He fell asleep midway through the show, he just dozed off. He was not in the best of medical shape, but I met him just before he died. We had an interesting back and forth, and then Candy took over the show, and she was pretty proficient.
Yeah, she took over the show after he died, and
Yeah.
and kept it going for a couple of years too. A couple of years after that. Here's the thing about Long John Nebel. People talk about Art Bell, right? They'll talk about me, or they'll talk about George Norrie. You know, these, and I understand why, of course, but Long John Nebel, and of course Frank Edwards, the two of them were doing this long before Coast to Coast AM and myself. They had a deep interest in not only the subjects, but their audiences were huge, ginormous audiences.
Yeah, although, Long John was pretty skeptical of a lot of this stuff. You see, my first book, now I was I say secular journalist because now I do a lot of spiritual reportage. That's all I do. But I was a newspaper reporter starting out. But my first book was on psychokinesis. It was called PK, a report on psychokinesis. It came out in 1977. 1977. And that's why I was on Long John's show for that. But yeah, that was an all-night deal. And there was some real back and forth. Yeah, it could be a tough show. Candy could be a tough customer.
In the if you go back and look at those early days, and you've got to put Edwards in this classification too. There was a UFO and slash paranormal craze across the country, and Long John had on his show as regular guests all of the main players in the UFO community and the spiritual community, and ghost and the paranormal and poltergeist and exorcist. You know, he had all of that on his show, and he was speaking to an audience of 50 million people. The United States, people think that this is some new phenomenon. It's not. It's always been of interest, not only in the United States, but worldwide, right?
Yeah. I mean, Frank Edwards was really the king. I mean, he was amazing. Long John Nebel's show I never heard except for the one I did with him, because I didn't live in New York City, at the time. I was living in the western part of the state, and we didn't get Long John Nebel. But yeah, he was a pioneer. And but Frank Edwards' books, man, you would just read and reread those things. They were amazing and continue to be amazing when you look back at them.
Yeah, I have a few of them, and again, you can go back and listen to the Mark Edwards broadcast. They're there in the radio. It's called in the Internet Radio Archive. Mm-hmm. And you can go just about everything is recorded. I mean, it's part of the FCC and the archiving of things. That's the rules. You have to archive your show. And thank goodness for the internet that this stuff has now all been digitized, and everybody can go back and listen to these very significant historical shows that are there. And as long as the internet is around, it's like going to the library, right? Getting a cassette, but you can do it for anything and just about any radio broadcast that has ever happened. Yeah. Yeah. How did your interest into all of this start?
Well, I just kind of grew up with it. My grandmother told stories about growing up in a haunted house in Pennsylvania, near Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and that was very, very, very intriguing to me. And that type of thing. Reading Frank Edwards books as a kid with my cousin and my brother, and just spending a lot of times with a book. There was a book called Things That Go Bump in the Night that was a big book on ghosts, and we would just eat up whatever we could get at the library, which wasn't very, very much. But when I became a reporter, and my first job was in Binghamton, New York, small city in the center part of the state, middle part. And while I was working there as a cub reporter, I was told to go out into the boondocks, that there was this guy in a town called Spencer, New York, and the people were trying to railroad him out of town as a witch. And he had been a school teacher. He lost his job because he had been doing psychic displays in the classroom. I don't know what they were
Whoa, okay.
referring to. So I went out there, and I remember it was very cold, and this is a cold part of the state, and snowy. And I got to his place. I had with me a friend of mine who was a university professor. He was interested in this type stuff. And we got out there, and I said, so I tell me what happened. And he said, well, they think they're calling me a witch and everything. I'm just a psychic. I have psychokinesis and psychometry, and, the whole panoply of different parapsychological type phenomena. And I didn't know how to take them. I said, well, like, what can you do? And he said, I have clairvoyance. I can find a hidden object. I said, what do you mean? He says, hide an object. I'm going to let you hide an object in my apartment while I go down a block, and then I'll come back and find it. And so I had him go down the whole block with my friend who was with me to make sure he wasn't peeking or whatever. And I took off my Fordham University ring, my school ring, and he told me I could hide it anywhere in his apartment. So I hid it up in this container of tea bags at the top of his cupboard, and made sure it didn't look flustered or anything. And then I opened the door and I signaled for them to come back up the block, and he did. And he opened a door, and he found it in 50 seconds.
What? Wait. Whoa. Pump the brakes right there.
That was nothing.
Really? Now, when you say 50 seconds, now he doesn't know what you've hidden, right?
No.
He doesn't know that. And he doesn't obviously know where.
And
you're saying in 50 seconds, he gets into the cabinet, gets into the tea bag, opens it up, and pulls out your Fordham.
That's right. When he came in that front door, he went right for the kitchen and right for the cabinet, opened it up, grabbed the jug with the tea bags, threw the tea bags out, and found my ring. All right. So anyway, but it got more incredible than that. I can tell you some other clairvoyance that he did was more impressive than that, including we had a judge. We decided to have a big experiment, a town-wide experiment in this other town, about a half an hour from where he lived. And we had a judge who was in charge of it. A local judge agreed to be in charge of it. And we said to him, you can hide your gavel anywhere in this town. Okay? Anywhere in this town. And Jordan found it in 15 minutes. Now, it was in a propane tank. Now, even though that's more than it took him for the tea bags, this could have been anywhere in the town.
Right.
Okay. So he went to that. And then I had a magician come in, actually two magicians one time, and to my apartment. And I had Jordan come over. And I said, I'm going to take a needle. I'm going to hide it somewhere in this apartment. So the magicians took him away, make sure he wasn't peeking. And we hid the needle in a stick of butter in a refrigerator. I mean, you couldn't see anything looking at the butter. A needle goes into butter very cleanly, And he came in and he just went right for the refrigerator and grabbed the butter. I mean, that's how this guy was. But that wasn't the most impressive stuff he did. The most impressive thing he did was that he would put his hands on a wooden table, a heavy wooden card table, and it would levitate. It would come off the ground, and it wouldn't just come off the ground. Mainly, it would tilt up funny at angles that couldn't be, and way over, and he'd be barely touching it, and so forth. But there'd be ticking noises in it, and as soon as you thought about them, they would stop in front of you, and he would ask the ticking noises questions, and they would spell out a code answers, this for yes, this for no, and so forth. I took him down to Kent State University's physics, Smith Hall of Physics, to be looked at by these physicists who had been working with Uri Geller and Stanford Research Institute and so forth. And he did it down there. They brought in their own magician and so forth. There was no questioning the fact that he's still around, that this guy has psychokinetic capability that cannot be explained. I had a TV guy, reporter from Buffalo, New York, one time, and he said, "Look, I want to go interview this Jordan." He says, I want to tell you right now. He said, "I hate to do this to you because this is going to be embarrassing." He says, "I don't believe in this stuff, and I know I'll be able to bust him." I said, "All right." I gave him his address, his phone number, and everything. He went down there and came back shocked. Just shocked, because you can't explain what you see and what you feel. You see, it's not just seeing a table come up off the ground. It's the fact that when you would press down on it, it would bounce back up like a beach ball in water. It's like you're trying to press down a beach ball.
Right.
And
right.
you could feel the force. What was real impressive about Jordan, and for all, I haven't been in touch with him in decades, but
what's his name? Jordan.
Phil Jordan.
Phil Jordan. Okay.
Spencer,
go ahead.
Spencer, New York. Okay. But what was also impressive was that he could do this every single time. It wasn't something that was there once in a while and then not there. He was just able to call it up at will. And we later found out, and now I used to call it psychokinesis, telekinesis. I wrote a book, like I said, called PK, a Report on Psychokinesis. If you look it up, Steiner Books came out with it in maybe it was 76, 77, 76, I think it was. And I did a story for the Atlantic Monthly about psychokinesis, not about Jordan, but about using random event generators and affecting them with powers of the mind. That was in October 1978. It ran in the Atlantic Monthly. But at any rate, when I wrote the newspaper article on Phil Jordan, before they ran that article in the newspaper, they wanted everyone in the newsroom to come and witness him, because it was a crazy story. And so I had an apartment full of reporters and photographers, and they all saw the same thing. There's not a one of them who doubted it. And we ended up running it. It was the longest story in the history of the Binghamton Sun Bulletin, which now the newspaper has merged into the afternoon newspaper. It was a morning paper at the time. But yeah, that was how I got into it big time, although I grew up with Frank Edwards like you did, and having that interest in various types of phenomena.
What does somebody like, I'm looking at Phil Jordan's picture. This guy looks like anybody else that would walk past you on the street. You know what I mean? He just looks, and the town wanted to run him he doesn't look, when somebody says witch, right, or warlock, you've got he's not that at all. But a stick of butter, that's just crazy. What does this do for you about the world that we live in, does it change your worldview that things just aren't what they seem to be or what we're taught?
Well, I grew up believing in the supernatural because of my grandmother's ghost stories. And so to me, it was substantiation that there was a paraphysical force. And I ended up, interviewing people in scientific laboratories who were various scientific laboratories around the world for that book I wrote on this subject. What it do for me? It substantiated the fact that there is a spiritual realm all around us, and that once in a while you run into somebody who can tap into it. In this case, at will.
This is a good point, and I'm glad that you brought that up. This is a good point to ask you. Your blog and your website and the writing that you do today is spiritual or religious centric, right? Great, it's awesome. Right. And but you've got a career and many books that you've authored that deal with the paranormal and the supernatural. Do those two worlds collide for you, or is it just that things are connected?
Well, by the way, if I can add to it, I started out, though, my first major books were secular. I wrote a book I was a reporter who broke the Love Canal case, toxic chemicals, Niagara Falls, when I was a reporter at the Niagara Gazette. I wrote a book on the Mafia for Simon & Schuster. And I wrote a book on paleoanthropology. It's not just this realm, but this is the realm that interests me the most. And I don't, the research, did it change worldview? Well, some of it, I think you have to be super careful with this stuff. I really do, Jimmy. We probably differ on this. As far as I'm concerned, learned the hard way that this can be real treacherous territory.
How so?
Well, I didn't start out. I didn't believe in spirits. I believed in a power of the mind. Okay, I didn't believe in angels and demons. All right, I came to believe in that.
Okay,
I certainly do now. Matter of fact, I have zero doubt about it. But I didn't originally, and I think you have to be careful with this stuff because a lot of it is deceptive. For instance, let's take Phil Jordan. It turned out that besides being a, quote, psychokinetic skills, he was also a spirit medium. Okay. And he would do seances in which an alternate personality called Doc would speak through his voice. His voice would totally change. His comportment would change. His gestures would totally change. I didn't get to see most of that because for some reason, this entity did not like coming around when I was there. So I would leave. In one case, I left a tape recorder behind with my friend who was, I mentioned, a professor, and said, tape it for me so I can listen later because it wouldn't come out if I was there. And so it came out afterwards, and he says the tape recorder went off, was clicked off at the second when the spirit came through. Well, that was frustrating. So the next time I brought two tape recorders. And then I left the house and let him go into his alternate consciousness or whatever it was, but the spiritual entity. And this time, both recorders went off simultaneously. They went out, clicked out. So now you're dealing with, as far as I'm concerned, you're not dealing with just some psychic force. You're dealing with a super intelligence. You're dealing with entities, And so my view began to shift very rapidly. I started out for the first couple of years just approaching it as an energy force from the mind, and I don't approach it that way anymore.
What I find compelling is this, and certainly with your research, you must have started to come to some conclusions. And I look at remote viewing. I've had, Uri Geller on the show. I've had Russell Targ on the show. I've had Paul Smith on the show, all the remote viewers and psychic mediums. And I've done ghost investigations, but and ET. And my house is haunted, by the way. You're telling me about your grandmother's house. Every family's got that story. I certainly have that story now for my grandkids. And I think that all of this is rooted in one basic thing that we just haven't figured out yet. And it's that next level, but I think it's all related and connected. And that includes the powers of the mind. But if you go back through history and you look at all of the religious texts that are there, that go back in some cases thousands of years, we're all talking about the same things, I think, but we just don't understand what that is.
You're not going to get an argument from me because I view things in a very similar light. I do say that you, in my estimation, you have to be careful. I mean, I've seen a lot of ill effects from this stuff. It's not neutral a lot of times, and even with Geller now, I saw something happen with Geller at his apartment on the Upper East Side of New York back in the 70s when I interviewed him. He was kind enough to let this reporter from Niagara Falls interview him, and while we were talking in his living room, a porous rock came winging into the room, and it smashed this beautiful wood chessboard he had. Now, if you're trying to, first of all, I don't think he's out to impress a reporter from the Niagara Gazette. And secondly, not with what was obviously an expensive chessboard. And yet here came this rock out of nowhere, smashing into it. So I've seen that, and with the Geller phenomenon, I'm conversant with that. I'm conversant with the fact that there is an interplay of different, quote, forces, his so-called powers of the mind, and then the UFO stuff and alien. I think they're all, I agree with you. I think you can put them all under an umbrella of the paranormal, of things that we just can't access all the time. We can't see all the time. We're not always conversant with, but are always around us. And I certainly think that all of us are spiritual beings surrounded by other spiritual beings, some of whom are not visible to us. Many of whom are.
Tom DeLonge, you know who he is. And
Tom DeLonge. I'm afraid I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, that's neither here nor there. But Tom DeLonge, he's a singer and guitar player for a band called Blink-182. Very tippity top, very successful band. Okay. But Tom, this is 2024, so about 7-8 years ago, he started an ET related company called To the Stars Academy. And but in doing so, he got into the soft white underbelly of the Pentagon and Lockheed Skunk Works and whistleblowers, and got his hands on some UFO videos. And the New York Times did a cover story back in December of 2017 about the Pentagon's secret UFO program. I think it's like the most viewed online article in the New York Times history, right? And it was a pretty groundbreaking thing. But that, I remember it. So that's Tom DeLonge. Okay. So Tom is on this show, and he says he had only done at that point no interviews. I think I was like the first or second. He's only done a handful even through to this day. But in that show, Michael, he said this. I'm going to paraphrase. He said, be careful. He's speaking to the groups of people that consciously call in UFOs, right? Okay. All right. Come down, my space brothers, right? Show yourselves, right? And he said, be careful with that. You don't know who you're communicating with. Absolutely. You need to be very careful. And that there were religious compartments inside of the Pentagon. You know, their generals go to church, right? If you know what I mean. And they have spiritual beliefs. And there may be a negative connection to this, and also Angels and Demons, which is another company that Tom DeLonge has. It's called Angels and Demons. I don't think that that's far off from what you just said. You need to be very careful with this subject.
No, I now used it. Back then, I thought the concept of angels and demons was yesteryear. You know, but I fully believe it now. I look back now, and a lot of the things I thought were superstitious are not very superstitious. I have seen, you know, now in the last 30 years, I've been full-time looking at religious phenomena, supernatural phenomena from often from a Catholic standpoint. That's how I was raised, and I've been to places like Lourdes and Fatima and Medjugorje where I've seen astonishing things that are beyond question supernatural and more powerfully supernatural than anything I saw around Uri Geller or Phil Jordan or all the other psychics that I interviewed.
Can you speak on something specific?
Well,
Fatima, for instance. Lourdes is another great, subject too as well. But
the one that's most powerful as far as ongoing situation is Medjugorje in former Yugoslavia, and I mean here you'll just stand outside with, let's say, at one point in my case, the first trip I was with, there were 15 of us standing outside of a bus just watching a star as it kept splitting into three other stars, blue, white, red, and then going back and forming a star again, and just doing this. And we had binoculars and everything, just kept doing that and doing it. And you'll see the sun do things that, like you read about what happened at Fatima. Well, that's happening right now at Medjugorje. You'll be in a field there, and it looked like the sun's coming right out of the sky at you. I mean, obviously it's not, but there's some type of paranormal phenomena that's certainly making it seem that way to everyone who's around there at that moment. Those are some of the things that are occurring there. But and I have seen some similar things at Lourdes, but mainly they're not as active as Medjugorje because they're older sites. I've been to, last time I counted, I think it was 34 places around the world where, for instance, the Virgin Mary allegedly has appeared or is appearing, and seen some wild stuff. Have you seen? Wait! Have you seen the Virgin Mary? Have I seen her?
Yeah,
myself. Not as a corporeal apparition like they do. Like
right. And when you read about the accounts of Fatima specifically, which is the one that I think most are familiar with, you have the visitation of the Virgin Mary when the kids were going out on their little adventures, and the communication happened. There's that part, which is absolutely fascinating, and those secrets I think are still held pretty tightly. Some of it's been leaked out by the Vatican, but really what was said and what was communicated, It's so what's the word I want to use? So controversial, or maybe earth shattering or earth moving, that the Vatican really hasn't revealed all of that. But then you had the other side, which was what happened in the sky when the crowds were there, and the photographs. The Fatima, I still can't. That's not easily explained, and there's an ET element to it that I'm drawn to as well.
Yeah, if you look at Medjugorje now, though, Jimmy, and you look at some of the sun phenomena, solar phenomena that's occurring there as we speak, you're going to be pretty dazzled. I mean, there's impressive footage on YouTube. Just look up Medjugorje and sun miracles on YouTube, and man, have a field day.
Yeah, I've watched a bunch of it. I can't. There is a pragmatic, skeptical side of me, even though I have the most open of open minds, and I've seen some crazy stuff, right? So there's that part. But the Medjugorje stuff, when I look at, I have a hard time being skeptical with that. You know what I mean? I have a hard time being pragmatic and just try to explain it away in a black and white sense. You can't. There's something else going on.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been there 8 or 9 times, and I brought groups with me at times, up to 150 people at a time. And I have never had one person, at least in my groups, return from Medjugorje anything but a total believer in that. And I've had some skeptical people going in, but it's a real hard place to discount once you're there. And it's not just what you see and feel. You don't have to see anything. It's the feeling.
Right.
There's this peace. I don't know if you haven't been there, man, I urge you to go there, because this is Phenomena Central. I mean,
all right. I can put that on the list. I can put that on the list.
Do yourself a favor and put it on the list. You don't have to. You don't have to walk the Catholic or Christian walk, but just go there and observe.
Well, can't you apply that to just about anything? I don't think it comes down to a specific religious belief. I was baptized Catholic. By the way, I happened to find this. You brought up being Catholic. After the break, I'll go grab it and bring it in. I have my original baptism paperwork. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Signed by my mom and dad. And I found it. It was just in a pile of paperwork, and I found, so it happens to be sitting in my office, on the desk in there, but holding that in my hand. So yeah, I get it. But today, I don't look at, when I go to these different locations around the world, or in the United States, it's not a religious thing. There's something else. There's something else going on, a very powerful force that could probably give a crap if you're Buddhist or Islam or Hindu or Catholic or Christian or any of the indigenous cultures or Mayan, right? It doesn't matter. That force, that whatever it is, exists throughout the universe.
Yes, and also whether or not you're atheist.
Right,
you're right.
Right.
You're right. I mean, it's because I've seen it at Medjugorje and elsewhere. There's no question about that. You're correct. And
you know who the most spiritual person in the world is? I can tell you right now. It's the atheist when the plane is going down. That guaranteed. Just a
lot of the phenomena at various apparition sites reminds me of like near-death experiences also. I've written a couple books on near-death experiences, and you'll get a lot of a similar feeling from them. This feeling of peace and more of a perspective on things. But man, I mean, the world is not only stranger than we imagine, but stranger than we can imagine. Who said that? Haldane? Was somebody like that?
Right.
That's the truth.
Now, when I look back, and I went to a couple of Catholic schools when I was younger, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Saint Teresa, Saint Elizabeth, right? Went to these schools, and I remember a little bit about what was going on. I look back at it, and I feel the dogma of it, because as an adult, the same conversations can be had in Peru that has nothing to do with the Christian church or Jesus, right? It had nothing to do with it, but it's the same conversation. And the same things were happening in the Middle East and in Egypt and in China. These same spiritual conversations were happening. And I felt that the dogma that I use the word dogma, what I was taught at a very early age kind of is the same story traded through folklore around the world. And I don't think I'm far off in that. I think everybody's trying to tell the same story.
Yeah, although in my case, I mean, I didn't go to church for I don't know how long, since I was like beginning of teen years right through 20s and early 30s. In my early 30s, in 1983-ish, or 1983, I believe was the year, maybe 82. As I mentioned, I was doing that book. I wrote a book on the Mafia. It was about a guy who was in a witness protection program. I had to go down, hide out with him. He had put away 74 gangsters from the Newark area, New Jersey. That's heavy traffic. But at any rate, I was doing a lot of research. And at one point, a friend of mine who was an Essex County detective, he had an informant on a street. He was a hitman, and who knew a hitman I was writing about. So I was real keen to interview this guy. And Ronnie set it up for me. And so we met in a back street in Newark, and he pulled up with his fur-lined Mercedes, and I hopped in, and he taking me around, showing me places as a favor to Ronnie, because he was an informant trying to keep out of jail. So he was doing Ronnie a lot of favors, and by way of me in this case. And he was showing me where he and this guy I was writing about had discarded some of their bodies. Well, long story short, when I returned to my apartment shortly afterwards, I had a supernatural experience that completely changed my life. This is how I got thrown back into the church. I was, it was a 3-part dream, and it was more real than being awake that occurred. And this did indicate to me very strongly, very clearly, that there was a force called evil, and I ran smack up against it in this incredible series of dreams I had. 3 dreams in a row. One started where the other left off, because I kept waking up. I was living in Manhattan at the time. I used to live on the Upper East Side of New York, and I kept waking up and pacing around and smoking cigarettes. And I'd go back to sleep, and the dream would continue where it left off. I was on a gurney. My feet were aimed towards the door of my apartment, and this incredibly terrifying etched face of like the devil or a devil or whatever, goateed and everything, kind of classic, kept materializing on my door. And there were these entities around me. I wasn't allowed to look at them directly. They were they seemed like sticks of energy that could have taken any form they wanted to. And it's like they had their hands over me, healing me. And anyway, like I said, a long story short, it was a 3-part dream. but the one who seemed to be in charge, when I asked his name, he said Michael. And at any rate, it was very shortly after that, like the next
that'll
day,
straighten you out. That'll straighten you out.
I went. I've been going to daily mass since then. That was that was 40 years ago. Okay.
I had a strange thought. I'm going to ask you a question. I need your advice. Okay. I live in the desert north of LA, 30 miles outside of LA. I live in a small town called Palmdale, right? It's a technical science. Yeah, it's a science community here. Lockheed and NASA is out here. Anyway, and it's nice out here. I love it. But next to my house, I live in between a golf course. I live on a golf course and this big park. Next to the park, and it's the desert, but you would never know it, right? It's beautiful trees and green and all of this. But anyway, next to the park is this ginormous church. Should I say the name of the church? I don't even know what denomination it is. It's called the Highlands, right? And it's big. It's huge, right? So the other day, mega church. I'm driving past it, going home, and I said to myself, go and sit in the back row. Just go and just check. Just go and see what's going on in there. But I kept driving. Should I do that? At least go and check out and see what's going on. I have no idea what they're. I know nothing about it. I've not looked it up online. But is that something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've done it myself. Like when I lived in New York, churches, like I'd stop in to see what they were all about. And usually they had something to offer. I may not go along with the whole program, but they had something to offer. And like I said, I got chased back into going to church.
Well, okay. Can I ask you one other question? I may do it, by the way. I'm not on some spiritual path, and I'm not looking, for me to, see the light and change my ways. I'm already on a pretty good road. But I am interested. But here's the question though. Being around mafia hitmen, evil is the right word, right? That's got to be. What did you see in their eyes, Michael?
Well,
I've never been around anybody that's killed anybody.
I'm glad you bring up eyes, because I used to have the mugshots of all the guys he had put away, more than 70 people, and you could see a demon, evil spirit, the reptilian nature of the spirit behind those eyes coming right through it. When there were mugshots, and this same detective who put me in touch with the guy on the street also had given me a lot of these photos. So I knew what they were looking in case I had to use them for some reason, and just so I knew how to describe them and so forth. But when somebody is taking a mugshot, their quintessence, their spiritual essence tends to pour forth through the eyes. And man, I remember this one guy. He was a killer, like so many of them were. But man, he looked like a werewolf. He looked like a werewolf in his mugshot. It looked like his face had transmogrified. And that was true of a lot of them. I went to interview a gangster who was in jail in Lovelady, Texas, at a state prison down there. And before I went to see him, I went to the FBI headquarters because they had dealt with him. They're the ones who put him behind bars. They told me he was about as dangerous a person as their agency had ever dealt with. This guy was a real clever dude from the Newark area, and he he was connected with a number of families. But anyway, I went down to interview him, and I'm telling you, what was streaming from his eyes and just coming at me was so intense that after about 20, 25 minutes, I had to say, "Excuse me, Raymond, I gotta take a cigarette break." And
Sure.
I had to go get myself together. There was such energy, and it wasn't good, coming from it. Evil is a real force. It's a real force.
And we're all born. It doesn't matter, right? Whether it's here or India, Brazil, China, UK, pick a country, doesn't matter. All babies are born equal, right? You got some DNA differences and you've got some genetic traits from stuff, but basically, you don't know good from bad, right? You don't understand those. No, we're all born equal. That's the fascinating part, how somebody can change and evolve into something that literally kills with instructions. That's mind-blowing to me. Do you remember I think it was on HBO. What was his name? The Iceman. Those interviews. He was a serial killer.
I remember a serial killer named the Iceman, but I don't remember a lot of details. I think I actually read a book about it, but
yeah, the book's out too. But it was the same thing that you're talking about. It's the eyes.
Yeah,
just scary.
Yeah, and they exude. There's an exudation from them that is palpable. There's a lot of strangeness. Of course, they don't frame it this way. They wouldn't understand it this way. Cops don't talk about it in these terms, although some of them come to believe that after a while. But yeah, I mean, and when I was at the hideout of the one guy I told you who was in the witness program, he had turned on these other guys. This guy looked like Lurch. He was like 6'4" and big box gangster face. He was at a hideout in Maryland, hiding with his family. And I remember the first time I ever went to the upstairs of his house, an object flew across his sister's bedroom. And what I'm trying to say is that besides the criminality, there was an underpinning of paranormal, of evil behind this. And there were various times at his hideout when there would be displays of paranormal phenomena around him.
Do you ever feel that, and we're going to take a break right now, I'll give you the heads up. Do you ever feel that this stuff follows you home?
Oh, it can, and it has. I'm pretty diligent about it these days. I mean, I'm pretty careful with it. You got to watch what you watch on TV. I mean, you have to be careful about YouTube, and you just got to. Things can channel through various means, and certainly things can bop on home with you. There's no question about that. I've seen that countless times in my own investigations and in my own life. Yeah, you have to be careful. Your worst enemy is the naive part of your personality.
You know what I stopped doing, and I think that we all do it as kids, but I don't watch horror movies. I don't do it anymore. I've completely lost interest in it. I'm not attracted to it. And it's really strange. I don't want that type of evil around me. But a friend, not a friend, but one of my neighbors growing up, he's a big Hollywood director and producer today. His name's Ryan Murphy. And went to high school with him and rode the school bus together and all of that. Today, he's like, the king of Hollywood. But he's got a long-running TV series. He did the TV show Glee, if you remember, won a lot of awards and stuff. But anyway, he's got another TV series with a ton of spinoffs. It's been on for 15, 20 called American Horror Story. And that he does it in a way that is really wrong. And I love it. It's like the wrong kind of horror. The stuff that you may think about, but you won't talk about, right? Well, he manages to get that on the screen. But the other stuff, no, it's really weird. I'm not attracted to it anymore. I don't want it in my presence, in my aura. Yeah. It's very strange. Yeah, let's take our break and we'll come back. And when we come back, I want to talk UFOs and aliens and disclosure. Can we do that?
Sure.
Yeah. We'll do that when we come back. Our guest, the one and only Michael H. Brown. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Hi, this is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I want to invite you to come to Alaska with me on the Contact at Sea cruise. It is this September 6th through the 13th, 2024. We are on the largest ship in the Pacific Ocean. That's right, the Ovation of the Seas. It's an amazing cruise, and a ship this big is so much fun. We've got lots of activities and lots of great speakers. We are leaving from Seattle to Sitka, Alaska, Skagway, Juneau. We're going to end the cruise in Victoria, BC, and arrive in Seattle on September 13th. We've got a lot of amazing speakers, including we've got Seth Shostak, Scott Walter, Stephen Bassett, Daniel Sheehan, Daryl Sims, Mas Adi, Vivian Chavez, Grant Cameron, Geraldine Orozco, Misha Johnston, and Melanie Aguirre, and a whole lot more. All you have to do is go to divinetravels.com. You can also go to contactatsea.com. Both are going to take you to a full event schedule. You can check in, look at the boat, get things ready to go, and maybe get a cabin with a balcony. That's what I'm talking about. Come see the whales. Come check it all out. Let's go to Alaska this September 6th through the 13th, 2024 with me, Jimmy Church. Now, when you head to divinetravels.com or contactatsea.com and get signed up, you know what? Use my name, Jimmy Church. I'll see you there September 6th through the 13th, 2024. Let's go to Alaska. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest, Michael H. Brown, is with us. During the break, I have talked a lot about this. A couple of weeks ago, I went back to Indianapolis, and for my very good friend's celebration of life, who recently departed this beautiful blue gem to go and discover and get all the answers to the questions that we all seek, Jerry Reeskamp. And so during the break, I'm texting with Jerry's wife, Melissa. She's watching the show, and big shout out to Melissa. Melissa, I love you, and I hope all is well. And I hope that I just put a smile back on your face. And there you go. I sat with Melissa for a little bit, and got to talk, and her interest in the paranormal, she's like, Jimmy, I've got questions. What's going on with the UFOs? What's going on with this? Crystals. Can we talk about crystals? It's like, where's it? And it was just fascinating. You just never, I think everybody's got an interest in all of this. And Melissa, all the best. And I'll talk to you soon. Also, Melissa rides. Right. And I wanted to talk to Michael about this. We were talking about this church down the street that I was thinking about sitting in the back row. You know what my church is, Michael? Is my Harley. I ride my Harley and I go into full Zen mode. Right. It's really weird. It's so spiritual. It's a very you find yourself, and I think anybody that rides, I'm not talking about the kids on the fast stuff, but mature mature adults on a Harley, I think they will all tell you the same thing, that you get inside of your own head and you ask yourself the questions at that moment, right? It's like meditation. And it's really weird. And I think you're very honest with yourself when you're out riding, and because you're alone with your own heart and soul. Does that make sense? And
I remember, you remember that book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance?
I read it when I was like 10. Did you read it?
No, I didn't. I've never been on a motorcycle. I hear him a lot because I live near Daytona Beach. But
right.
We have Biker Week and we have something in October too. So I'm conversant with motorcycles.
They ride on the beach there.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. They said that's the original stock car races run. That's why Daytona Beach is there. They raced cars and motorcycles on that beach.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely nuts. All right, let's talk about ET for a second. And you've been at this long enough to know that today this subject is now public after decades of it being the most taboo subject of all, right? Why suddenly is it okay to discuss this not only in the media but just in public in general?
Well, I think first of all because the reports just kept on keeping on, as they say, and also because of some of the movies like Spielberg's stuff, Close Encounters and so forth, kind of opened up kind of perceptual perspectives on things. I think that had something to do with it, but just the number of reports. I mean, I think like any paranormal phenomena, and I classify UFOs as paranormal, there's just been a ratcheting up of the phenomena in recent years and decades, but especially the last few years. You're just seeing a lot of reports and a lot of sightings of UFOs, as well as, like I said, other forms of paranormal phenomena. So I think it's just a matter of so many people who are credible coming up and saying, look, I saw this, I saw that, something is going on here. And, it gets to the point where it's not all confabulation.
And what do you make of the interests of the Senate and the House, Capitol Hill in general, having hearings on this subject? This is the last time that this happened. It was in a negative sense, and that was back in the late 60s, pushed forward by Gerald Ford, then governor of Michigan, because you remember the swamp gas, quote, that came out of Michigan. And but we're talking about the late 60s, and now it's an open conversation with elected officials. I find that very strange. Like somebody flipped a switch and said, "Okay, it's all right to talk about this now."
Yeah. Well, some of it was the New York Times, with their expose of the Navy sightings off San Diego as well as Jacksonville, Florida. So that had a lot to do with it, and just increased drips and drabs from places like Area 51 and so forth, Wright-Patterson accounts, and it's in the common vernacular because of cable TV too. When we went away from just 3 networks controlling everything, and all of a sudden had dozens of outlets, they had to fill airtime, and they started to fill it with psychic phenomena, with UFOs and so forth. So a lot of it is a product of the cable TV industry. And now, of course, the internet has really put it on steroids.
Now, it's not a new phenomenon. You write about you have a religious background and things. This has been, if you take the Bible, and I'm not in any way trying to get into some heretical conversation or promote that, but if you look at the Bible and you start interchanging words, right, with ET and suddenly you've got a pretty good science fiction expose that's been around for thousands of years, and I don't think I'm far off in that, because of the explanation throughout before now. Right now it's UAPs and UFOs, but before that what was seen in the sky is referred to the heavens, could have been space, but they didn't have a way to come up with words to accurately describe the phenomenon that they were seeing. Are you okay with that type of mindset?
Well, I think that there are forces of good and evil, that they come in various guises throughout the centuries in accordance with our technology. They were fairies at one time and leprechauns and so forth. And,
exactly.
And I think that at least a lot of it, I'm not saying all of it, because look, there's a lot of planets out there. I'm not saying that there can't be a craft at Wright-Patterson. I'm not saying that in Nevada there isn't something out there also. But much of it is spiritual phenomena, and unfortunately, a substantial proportion of that is demonic phenomena. A lot of times, you will see demonism left behind after a UFO sighting, or the UFOs will frequent a place of ritual witchcraft, for instance, or other forms of phenomena. You'll see a convergence of various types of cryptozoology, along with ufology, along with haunted stories and demonism and all these other things in the same locale. And in those cases, it's not unusual to find an Indian burial mound. It's not just the stuff of Spielberg on TV. So a lot of it just gets back to the intersection of dimensions, and there are countless dimensions. We can't hope to understand them while we're within the confines of physicality. So, you have to be open-minded, as long as you don't let anything real dark in, because there are dark forces out there. I was back in 1975, when I was doing that research on psychic phenomena. We were also looking at haunted houses in Binghamton, New York. And in one house, it was an apartment. All of a sudden, the apartment got real frigid. And myself and the guy, Don Kennedy, who was doing this with me, we went over to the thermostat and we looked, and the thermostat was reading normal, but you could see your breath. I mean, it was spooky. He went back across the room. I was still, I don't know what I was doing near the thermostat, but I went to go back to see him, and all of a sudden I just found myself thrown across that room. I mean, I don't want to use hyperbole. It had to have been a bare minimum of 10 to 12, 14 feet in the air. Okay, he saw me. I mean, he watched me go through the air. Some like a cushion of air just whisked me across the room. I've seen stuff like that happen, and it didn't leave me with an especially good feeling. And since that time, now looking at things from as religious phenomena as opposed to psychic phenomena, parapsychology, and metaphysics and so forth, looking at stuff from a religious standpoint, has allowed me to make more sense of it, and also to defend against being thrown across the room. I've seen some tremendous manifestations in the spiritual realm since I've come the way of, if you want to call it, the religious route. But
now, do you think? Now you just touched upon this, so I'm going to circle back to your comment. Do you think that scientific organizations like Lawrence Livermore or CERN that are doing theoretical experiments, they're doing stuff just to see what will happen, right? They don't know what the results are going to be, and I understand that's how you right? You go out and just you blow stuff up. But do you think that they could have opened up a portal to another dimension and let stuff in unknowing, just because they're colliding particles at the speed of light?
I seriously doubt it. I seriously doubt it. I think that what they're doing, if you'll excuse me, is not but simple stuff. In the realm of the metaphysical, I don't believe so. Anything's possible, but no, I don't think that they've opened portals. I think portals are being opened, but they're being opened as they have been through the millennia, and that's spiritual means, and often not really advisable spiritual means. You got to be careful what comes through those so-called portals, because we have no control over it, even though we might think we do.
I was at a site in Peru, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's called a Marumuru, and it's a pretty famous place. And now it's out in the middle of nowhere, and it's on the side. It's a big granite stone hill, and it's flattened on one side, but there's this keyhole shaped. It's about maybe 8 feet tall, maybe 6 feet tall. It's a portal to nowhere. It's a doorway to nowhere in the side of this stone hill. It's been there for millennia. Anyway, so I go, and there's been stories about people disappearing and going in and, open sesame, whatever, something is said, and they disappear. So I'm there, and I sit in this thing, and I put my arms in it. After we were done, Michael, and I'm just going to tell you how it happened. I'm not blowing this up into something that it's not. We're leaving the site, and we're going down. It's a very small village, maybe 100 houses down the road, but it's in a very remote thing. And so everybody's walking down, and I'm last to leave, and I'm standing there with this lady. And at that moment, from my feet, this like electricity started coming up my feet into my body, through my head, like zinging. And she turns to me, and I'm kind of, I don't have another word to say, but I'm tripping out, right? I'm like, whoa. And she says, my body is zinging. And I looked, I said, you feel this, right? She goes, I do. This is crazy. And it was this, and it lasted about 2 minutes. Now, it's the location, right? There's something the ancients knew about this. That's why this portal is there. It's a spiritual place. But I felt it. I don't know what it was, and I've never felt anything like that before. It was crazy. Yeah, it was about
power spots, like in Castaneda, Carlos Castaneda stuff. That's
Did you read Castaneda?
Yeah, I did.
I did too. I did.
Yeah. I found it very interesting.
Yes. I remember, so I read like his first 4 books, 4 books. And I remember finishing the last one. And this is what I said to myself. Either this is the craziest, awesome stuff ever, or this guy is the best fiction writer that's ever existed. Right. And I kind of closed it and went, I'm in between. I'm stuck in the in between with Carlos Castaneda.
So am I. I don't know. I think he did encounter phenomena with Indians. That's out west.
His stories. But you know what? He said one thing. Let me ask you about this. He said one thing that has absolutely stuck with me for my entire life. There was a line, he's talking about Don Juan, and he's doing this thing, but he tells this story about driving down the road. He's alone in his car, and he passes somebody on the road, right? I don't know if they're hitchhiking or whatever. He doesn't pick them up. He drives down the road. and the same person is there again. He passes it, doesn't pick him up. And he drives down the road, and there is the person again, right further down the road. And he says, I'm paraphrasing, never pick up a lone hitchhiker. It's death. Right. Now it's like, I think Don Juan told him that. I think that's what it was. He told Don Juan about the person right on the road. And Don Juan said, it's a good thing you didn't pick him up because, and that always stuck with me. Now, again, I'm in the middle on this. Is this like, or is it just a really good story? Is it folklore?
I mean, it is still a mystery after all these decades now, since the 70s. It's astonishing, but this much I know, and that's that spirits can take physicality. They can take physical form, and so he could have been running into some of that stuff, and it could have been what seemed to be human beings, but we're not actually human beings. I have no question about that.
Now, you went through, right now, I'm usually the old guy in the room, but right now you're the old guy in the room. Okay. So we can, but you went through, like firsthand, the contactee and abduction phenomena that was going on in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it was a lot of people that were involved, and some of them I know personally. What do you make of the abduction phenomenon, and is it still going on today, but in a different form, or we're just not hearing about it?
Oh yeah, I think more than ever. Of course, and perhaps you interviewed him back when, but Betty and Barney Hill there in New Hampshire, and then that case out west where was it, in Arizona, where the fellow
Travis Walton
disappeared for 3 days, was it, or something like that. It's very perplexing. I know some of it is spiritual phenomena, but I can't say all of it is. I know some of it is demonic phenomena, but that's not to say all of it is. I mean, you look at one time I was walking around the French Quarter in New Orleans about 30 years ago, and you see outside of one shop there was a voodoo statue, looked just like the alien that's up there in the screen I'm looking at right now. The face. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of what we call aliens are spirits playing games with us, and not so. And they're not so friendly sometimes. They're just trying to find an inroad. And right now, the way to do it is through technology, and so they're only too happy to come through. I think that because of all of the witchcraft that is now practiced, and psychic phenomena that started back in the 70s. Actually the 60s in this country in a big way, that portals have been open, and that there are more and more manifestations of this. I think that in my experience, and I'm not saying it's more than yours or anyone else viewing us right now, but in my experience, the majority of aliens have been spirits, and I don't think good ones.
There is, have you seen anything strange in the sky that you can't explain?
Yes.
Give me an example.
Well,
there's a reason why, Michael, I'm asking.
Of course, I mentioned the thing at Medjugorje with the star that was doing
sure.
that, but also here in the United States, there was this couple. When I was a newspaper reporter, I went out to interview this couple who were, every night they'd see this, quote, UFO, unquote. And I went out there, and there was a light hanging in the sky. I mean, it was not something I could explain it. Now that was more like a portal because it didn't look like a vehicle. It looked more like an energy construct, you know. But yeah, from time to time, we've seen some things that take you back. Nothing that I could hang my hat on at this point. But you know, I mean, I'm sorry.
Do you think it's interdimensional?
I think that most of them are, and of course, I put spiritual in that realm too, because spirits operate in dimensions. And yes, I think that most of it is interdimensional. I wouldn't be surprised if pretty near all of it is interdimensional, metadimensional, whatever word you want to use for it. But look, aliens act an awful lot like spirits.
They do.
A lot of aliens can go through the wall.
That's
right. Now, why do they need a flying saucer if they can go through a wall? Why do they need any transportation at all if they can teleport?
But this is where, okay, not quite a debate, but I will say this. You said earlier, one of the most important points when it comes to this subject, not only spirituality, but ET. The universe is a friggin' big place. We can't wrap our head around really how big it actually is. And we now know, science has proven that every star, you walk out in your backyard, look up in the sky, you can see about 2,500 to 5,000 stars on any night, on a clear night. Every one of those stars has at least one planet. We didn't know that 25 years ago, but we know that now. And the Milky Way is just a little speck of everything else that there is. So what that says to me, and this is the part where I'm kind of debating the point, is that the different types of civilizations out there that could be visiting this planet are as varied as anything that you can imagine. So some are interdimensional, some are cruising around in flying saucers.
That could well be. However, I think you also got to look, Jimmy, at near-death experiences and how they go through universes to get to different destinations, and including galaxies and mega galaxies and so forth. What's that all about? Now, they're in a spiritual realm at that point.
Right.
They're having a near-death experience. So, man, I mean, we'll never come to grips with it while we're within the confines of flesh and blood.
And trying to stay physical with it. You're right. As long as the science is it's a funny thing for me, and I know you've gone through the same experiences. Science stops at consciousness. They don't want to go there. Right? They don't want to, if it's not chemicals or numbers, right, or things that they can prove, the conversation stops. But then you have the scientists that have a near-death experience, and they're profoundly changed from it, right?
That's right.
But they were raised in that university construct of a road that you're not allowed to take any exits off of. You've got to stay right in your lane, and you can't go off of it until something happens.
Well put. Mm-hmm. That's well put. And a lot of times they don't let anything happen. You can stop this phenomena, as you know. You can stop it a lot of times. Sometimes you can't. But and they do. They manage to stop it in their lives. They're not open to it. When you're closed-minded, the stuff will bounce off you a lot of times. It's astonishing to me that you could have so many accounts of, quote, ghosts and UFOs and aliens and all this paranormal phenomena, psychics, Uri Gellers, and all of these reports, and still have people who either know nothing about it or just won't even look at it. won't even look at it. But getting back to what you said about the universe, it's a real difficult one, because there's so many of these near-death experiences. Yes, a lot of them are going through a tunnel to another reality, but an equal number, it seems to me, are flying by stars and galaxies and what seems like space. And they even describe a place that looked like a distant galaxy that they're being whisked toward, and that this was a level of the afterlife. So, wow, we got a lot to learn.
This is my version of a Pandora's box, right? Most Pandora's box references is, your greatest fear, but to me, it's like the great unknown. So you open up the box, and the box is this: E.T. arrives. Okay, E.T. arrives, starts talking to us. Let's go. Got any questions? Right? And we are going to find out that the physical side of the atheist, pragmatic, science, theoretical physicist that, when you die, you just become fertilizer, right? That they've got it all wrong. I think that's the message that we're going to get from ET. It's not a cure for cancer, and it's not ending pollution, right? Or stopping all wars. It's going to be consciousness is what runs things, right? Math and numbers, we gave that up a long time ago. And I think that's we don't need, you're with me. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, it's they're going to find out that there's a different paradigm, and it's a lot different than they imagined, and that they figured out with their calculations. You know how much money we waste on some of this scientific stuff that could be better spent elsewhere? I mean, they just keep going around in loops. I mean, science is great in a lot of ways. Look, I'm taking medication for high blood pressure and so forth. Medical, science has done some wonderful things, but it's also given us such a limited view of the real reality. And Earth is such a microscopic part of that.
Why do you think when we look back, and the Vatican messed with a lot of progress, by the way, right? So if we back up and we look at Copernicus, or we look at Galileo, and certainly Isaac Newton, these movers and shakers of science, but if they stayed in their lane, right, and listened to the religious leaders of the time and the monarchies of the time that had a belief system, then the progress would have never happened. And we need scientists like Galileo and Newton that thought outside of the box. Newton was as religious as he was a mathematician and a physicist.
Yeah.
And he was into alchemy.
Yeah. You're right. But I guess I differentiate between religion and spirituality. That's what I called our website spiritdaily.com for a reason. I don't want to be bound by any formulations of men. I mean, spirit is a lot bigger than any religion, and it's so big that there's no one who can define it. So I mean, I listen to the Vatican because I think that they make a lot of great points. Obviously, I'm a loyal Catholic, but I'm not a fanatical religious person, and I read widely in other religions as well, and I especially listen to these near-death experiences because I find a consistency. I've read probably close to 100 books on near-death experiences. I've interviewed, I'm sure you have too, dozens of the people who've had the experience, and and so forth. They are so informative. A lot of them are so informative of a greater reality, one that cannot be put in any one single book, one that cannot be defined by one single clutch of men. So, I'm with you in a lot of ways in what you're saying there. I understand where you're coming from, and I agree in large part.
I got to where I am the same way that you did, which is you have an experience that goes against what you're taught, and then you're forced to take a step back and go, well, I almost want to use a bad word. I'm not going to do it because you're a guest on my show, but it forces you to step back and go, what other BS have we been taught? And that has formed a belief system. And that's me. So I've just kind of backed up and thought, well, I'm going to try to get these answers on my own. The instructions that have been presented to me, I'm not buying into most of it.
Like I said, I came to it through the Mafia. I wasn't in the Mafia, but it was experiential. It was stuff that I saw, running up against actual evil can be very convincing, very, very convincing indeed. And there's a backstory to so many things in life, a spiritual backstory. I look at this Mafia book. There was spiritual phenomena attendant to the whole story. It was a murder story. They offed a kid who they thought was an informant, and the body got found and blah blah blah, and he had to turn in state witness and so forth. But there was a lot of different phenomena that were described, and I'll never forget when that gangster, that big guy, said he looked like Lurch. When he was describing the murder to me when they killed the kid at this pond, and soon as he hit the stride of the murder itself and so forth, which believe it or not, took a lot out of him to discuss.
Sure.
He had a German Shepherd in his backyard. That dog howled in the most uncanny, eerie fashion the entire time until the second he stopped, the howling stopped. But you'd run into phenomena like that on a constant basis. There is a spiritual understory to everything, and certainly to the universe.
Well, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because would have never thought in my lifetime that the Big Bang in 13.8 billion years would become a point of contention and debate in the science circles. But today it is. And that the origin and the beginning of time, it wasn't, probably isn't at the start of our universe, and that it's much older than we originally thought. And then you bring in the multiverse idea of things. So what that suggests to me is that DNA, you and I, that's a miracle. If it's a true miracle, if it's by chance, or is there something, I'll use the word divine, some very smart being that is creating this stuff all over the place? And that is that God? I don't know. Is that spiritual? I don't know. But it seems like there's an intelligence behind all of it.
I personally have zero doubt about that. Now, I wrote a book called The Search for Eve, which was about paleoanthropology and using mitochondrial DNA to backtrack to the first anatomically modern Homo sapien, in Africa. And so I had to interview a bunch of geneticists and fossil experts. The Leakeys in Africa, I went to interview them in Africa, and Japan to interview this person. A lot of different scientific types, that's for sure. And let me tell you something. First of all, they don't agree on anything. They fight like cats and dogs over every single step of the way. We think they've got settled science in a lot of regards. Forget it. You can take the diorama in the museums that show evolution, and and there's going to be somebody come along that's going to dispute that from the anthropology department at University of Michigan. I mean, the disputes are incredible. What I took away from the whole thing is you got evolution and you got natural selection. I don't doubt evolution. I mean, you can see it. You can see things the way it progressed. What I doubt is this idea of natural selection, that these things happen by chance. I believe that there's a force, that God evolved things. Evolution means unfold, and he unfolded existence in a piecemeal fashion. But like I said, my point is that if anyone thinks that the Darwinists out there have everything figured out and therefore you can forget about God, they've proven you don't need him, all you got to do is write a book like the one I had to write for Harper and Row and find out how little they agree with each other about.
The basic, and I've interviewed many anthropologists on this subject, and I'm pretty steadfast, and it's this: Darwin is full of crap. And if we go with, and hear me out, I just used a bad word. I'm sorry about that, Michael.
No,
but
but
in that, there, Homo sapiens sapien has only been here for 200,000 years. That's it. There's nothing. There's no. And if you go with Darwin's explanation of evolution, that takes millions and millions of years to get to a certain point. We, us, you and I, with our perfect forehead and our chin and our skin without any, all of us, this beautiful, the feminine and the masculine, and we just appeared. We just out of nowhere, Homo sapiens sapien. Now, I'm not talking about Lucy and what you're referring to in Africa. Look at Lucy and look at the shape of the skull. Look at Cro-Magnon, look at Neanderthal, and look at the way they look, and then look at us. We just appeared. And our chromosomes, we have 46 pairs instead of 48 like primates. That doesn't make any sense either. So what does make sense to me? Something, I don't know what or who, but dropped us off here. It created us, and that's something that I'm pretty confident in saying. I think I'm on the right side of history in the future. I don't know what it is, but somebody did it. Somebody with a lot of intelligence and made that modification so you and I could sit here and ponder this conversation.
You can look at some of the most basic animals, and even just that one single animal would take millions of years to evolve by luck, by happenstance,
right?
Natural selection. I mean, it's totally implausible. I mean, why, for instance, does evolution have to create perfectly formed feathers on a bird, placed just right symmetrically and so forth? Why? Why would they, to survive, why would that animal need perfect alignment? It's obvious that there's an intelligence behind this design, not just of humans, but I think of all animals. And my own way of looking at it is that a super intelligence, I call God, evolved us, unfolded us from small form into increasingly complex through call it evolution, because it just means unfolding. So I don't know. I agree with certainly major parts of what you're saying.
Yeah, because there's forever is a long time. Okay.
Right.
It's a long time. And 13.8 billion years is a sliver. It's like a layer of atoms. Right, you know what I mean? In forever, right? We are just like right there. Well, there is somebody, an intelligence that has gotten smarter and smarter forever. Right? That's where I'm at with this. Call it what you will, give it a name, but that is what is driving everything. And
Jimmy, if you take a look at, they toss around things like 3 or 4 billion years. They can't know that. There's no, they can't know for sure how old the universe is. I remember one time I was at University of Tokyo and I was waiting to interview a seismologist. I was doing a different book that had to do with possible future events. I do a lot of prophecy books and books that have to do with it. This was a scientific book that I was doing. And I was waiting for the appointment, and I happened to notice that there was an American who was in the classroom next door, and he was between classes. So I said, "Hey, how you doing? You're from where you from?" He was from Berkeley, from California. We started talking. He was an evolutionary evolutionist, or whatever you want to call him, and we started to debate. And I said to him, he mentioned that Earth was 3.8 billion, or I forget the figure he used. And when I questioned him on that, on how he had a benchmark that he could figure that out from, he went nuts on me. Now, this was a very prestigious University of Tokyo. This guy had a good position there. And he started yelling at me, "If you don't believe that mankind is 3.8 million years old, get out of my classroom right now." So I got up and I left. He had to resort to screaming and yelling, because he could really, when he got down, really kept backing him up and backing him up and backing up to day one and figuring out ages of mankind. They don't know. That whole book I wrote was called The Search for Eve, was about exactly this topic. They don't know.
Do you think it's possible? And I'm not going to use the A word, Atlantis. I'm not going to go there. I'll use the A word, Antarctica, though. Do you think it's possible for different eras of civilization that could have come and gone throughout history and deep history, and we're just another example of that?
Why not? Yeah. Sure. Including Atlantis. I mean, it's or whatever. We know nothing. We know so very little. We think we know a lot. But like I said, when I was constantly startled by how little all of these people who form the dioramas in our museums actually know, and how little they agree with each other. They're constantly fighting with each other, and I mean viciously, personal things. And I met Richard Leakey. I don't know if you heard that name. He was of course, famous fossil hunter. And I met his mother. His matter of fact, his mother arranged for my Land Rover in Kenya and Tanzania. But man, I mean, I tried to get to the root of it, and I came away thinking that they know precious little.
Just today, we'll wrap on this. I want your opinion, and then we'll say goodnight. By the way, one of the best shows and conversations I've had in a long time. Thank you so much. Just today, a press release published in the journal Nature. Okay, I would say the journal Nature is one of, if not the most prestigious journal in the world, right? That's where everybody wants to land on when you're doing stuff. Okay, so published in the journal Nature today, the altar stone in the center of Stonehenge came from Orkney in the north of Scotland, 473 miles from Stonehenge. And this stone, it's weathered, but today it weighs 6 tons. Okay. All right. I don't know its origin weight, but 6 tons, 500 miles, 5,000 years ago. Now, that talk about rewriting history, that the UK was integrated, but they were just like those dioramas that you're talking about, right? It was nomadic, it was this, it was that, and it was all local, and it's not that big of a deal, nothing to see here, keep moving along. That's a really big deal, isn't it? And what does that tell you about what we understand about the past?
We understand very little. I mean, there's just one, enigmas wrapped in conundrums. It's a mysterious situation, and like I said, when I was doing that book on the origin of man from a DNA standpoint, I was shocked by how little these guys agree with each other. Even the ones, and most of them are atheists. They're going to figure everything out mechanistically.
Right.
Good luck.
Yeah. Michael,
good luck.
Keep doing what you're doing, man. And
you too.
We appreciate it.
You're excellent.
No, you are. I learn from people like you, and you do all the work. I get the information out of you, but our audience is along for the ride. And just thank you for sharing tonight. It was just a wonderful show. Now, where can everybody chase you down? Where can everybody chase you down?
Well, believe it or not, spiritdaily.com. Spiritdaily.com is a daily and basically religious phenomena, mystical phenomena. We're really into mystical phenomena. And also, believe it or not, my kids got me into it, and I do a lot of TikToks.
Do you really?
Yeah, I had one that hit pretty good for a couple million recently.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Michael Brown, TikToker. Who would have thought? Thank you so much, man. It keeps you young. See, that's why it keeps you young. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Thank Appreciate you, and I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much.
Take care. Good luck on your trips.
Yeah, you too. Have a great night. Michael H. Brown. It is spiritdaily.com. The links are below. And I was telling Michael, I could not, earlier today, I could not get off of his site. I couldn't do it. So go and check it out. It's absolutely amazing. And with that, tomorrow night on the show is our once a month AMA AJA Ask Jimmy Anything. So I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Remember, all caps. Until then, go Backley Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Backley Tappy.